Commander Veltar stood on the observation deck of the Galactic Defense Station, watching the small human ship approach through the viewport. The vessel looked tiny compared to the massive Saurian warships docked nearby. Its hull was gray and simple, with strange markings that spelled soul's pride in human letters. Veltar's scaled hands gripped the metal railing as he studied the approaching craft. After 40 years of military service, he had fought alongside many different species: the strong gorillans with their massive arms, the quick felinians with their sharp claws, the smart cerebroids with their large brains. But humans were new to the galactic community and nobody knew much about them yet. "Sir, the human delegation has requested permission to dock," said Lieutenant Crix, a young Saurian officer with bright green scales. "Granted," Veltar replied, his voice deep and rough. "Let's see what these mammals can do." The docking process took longer than usual. Human technology seemed different from what Veltar was used to. Their ship moved slowly and carefully, like they were being extra careful not to damage anything. This made Veltar wonder if humans were naturally cautious creatures. 20 minutes later, Veltar waited in the main docking bay as the human ship's door opened with a soft hiss. 4 figures stepped out, and Veltar got his first close look at living humans. They were smaller than he expected. Veltar stood 8 feet tall with thick scales and powerful muscles built for combat. These humans barely reached his chest. Their skin looked soft and pink, with no natural armor or claws. Their eyes were small and their teeth looked weak. How could such fragile creatures be warriors? The lead human stepped forward and saluted in the galactic military style. "Commander Veltar, I am Captain Jiho Kim of the Earth Defense Force. Thank you for allowing us to join your mission." Veltar studied Captain Jiho carefully. The human was tall for his species, with short black hair and dark eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. His uniform was clean but showed signs of wear, suggesting real experience. When he spoke, his voice was calm and steady. "Captain Kim," Veltar replied, returning the salute. "I have read your service record. 2 years fighting orbital pirates, near your home system. Impressive for such a new species." "Thank you, sir." Jiho gestured to his team. "This is Lieutenant Nari Park, our tech specialist and pilot. Sergeant Dongwu Lee, heavy weapons, and Private Subin Choi, our scout." Veltar looked at each human in turn. Lieutenant Nari was smaller than the others, with quick eyes that seemed to examine every piece of equipment in the docking bay. Sergeant Dongwu was built like a tank, with broad shoulders and thick arms, though still much smaller than any Saurian warrior. Private Subin looked very young, with a bright smile that seemed out of place on a warship. "Your species is compact," Veltar said, trying to be polite. "How do you handle combat situations with such limited physical capabilities?" Captain Jiho's expression didn't change, but Veltar noticed something flicker in his eyes. "We make do with what we have, Commander. Our methods might be different from yours." Over the next few hours, Veltar showed the humans around the station. They asked many questions about weapons, tactics, and ship systems. Lieutenant Nari seemed especially interested in the station's defensive grid, while Sergeant Dongwu spent time examining the heavy plasma cannons. During the tour, Veltar noticed something strange about the humans. They moved differently than other species he knew, not slower or faster, but with a kind of controlled energy, like they were always ready to spring into action. Their eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, noting exits, cover positions, and potential threats. "Your people seem very alert," Veltar commented to Captain Jiho as they walked through the armory. "Old habits," Jiho replied simply. "On Earth, the ones who didn't pay attention usually didn't survive long enough to have children." This made Veltar pause. Most civilized species had evolved past such primitive survival instincts. The fact that humans still carried them suggested a violent evolutionary history. That evening, Veltar reviewed the mission briefings with his mixed team. Pirates had been attacking trade ships in the Rim territories for several months. Intelligence suggested they had a base somewhere in the Theta Centauri system. The mission was simple: find the base, gather information, and report back. Standard reconnaissance work. The pirate ships appeared to be using modified civilian vessels, Veltar explained, pointing at the holographic display. Nothing too dangerous, we should be able to handle any encounters without difficulty. Captain Jiho studied the star charts carefully. What about escape routes, if we run into more than we can handle? Escape routes? Veltar was confused. Captain, we have a full team of experienced warriors and a well-armed ship. What could possibly threaten us? The humans exchanged glances that Veltar didn't understand. Lieutenant Nari leaned forward. With respect, Commander, in our experience, things usually go wrong when you least expect them to. Veltar felt slightly annoyed. Perhaps your species lacks confidence due to your physical limitations. You will find that proper planning eliminates most risks. Private Subin spoke up for the first time during the briefing. Sir, we always hope for the best, but we prepare for the worst. The comment struck Veltar as unnecessarily pessimistic. Successful military operations required confidence and proper preparation. Fear and doubt led to hesitation, which led to defeat. Yet something in the human's tone suggested experience rather than cowardice. Later that night, Veltar observed the humans in the station's common area. They sat together, talking quietly and checking their equipment. Other species on the station ignored them or watched with mild curiosity. The humans seemed used to being outsiders. Veltar approached their table. I'm curious about your homeworld. What kind of environment produces warriors like yourselves? Captain Jiho looked up from cleaning his sidearm. Earth is, complicated. We have predators, natural disasters, diseases, wars. Most of our history involves surviving things that wanted to kill us. And yet you survived to reach the stars, Veltar observed. Yes, Sergeant Dongwu said quietly. We're good at surviving. Something in the way he said it made Veltar's scales prickle slightly. There was no boasting in the statement, just a simple fact stated with absolute certainty. The next morning, their ship departed for the Rim territories. Veltar commanded a strike cruiser with advanced shields and weapons. The human ship followed close behind, looking fragile next to the Saurian vessel. As they traveled through hyperspace, Veltar found himself watching the humans more carefully. They moved through their duties with quiet efficiency. No wasted motion, no unnecessary chatter. Lieutenant Nari had somehow improved their sensor array sensitivity by 15%, using techniques Veltar had never seen before. How did you learn to modify Saurian technology? He asked her during a routine systems check. Trial and error, she replied, not looking up from her work. Humans are good at making things work, even when we don't fully understand them. Days into their journey, they reached the edge of the Theta Centauri system. Veltar felt confident about the mission ahead. His team was experienced, his ship was powerful, and intelligence suggested only light pirate activity in the area. He had no idea that everything was about to go very wrong, and that these small, fragile humans were about to show him something that would change his understanding of warfare forever. The abandoned mining station hung in space like a dead metal spider, its solar panels dark and its docking bays empty. Veltar studied the structure through his ship's sensors as they approached the Theta Centauri system's fourth planet. No life signs detected, reported his sensor officer. The station appears to have been abandoned for several months. Veltar nodded. According to their intelligence, pirates had been using abandoned stations as temporary bases before moving on. This one seemed perfect for a quick search and investigation. Captain Kim, Veltar said into his communicator, we will dock and search the station. Keep your ship ready for quick departure if needed. Understood, Commander, came Jiho's voice through the speakers. Request permission to send a team aboard with you. Veltar considered this. The humans had no real experience with this type of mission, but they needed to learn somehow. Granted, bring your full team. 20 minutes later, 12 figures stood in the station's main airlock. 8 aliens from Veltar's regular crew, plus the 4 humans. The station's atmosphere was stale but breathable, and emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the metal walls. Teams of 3, Veltar ordered. Search each section systematically. Look for signs of recent activity, equipment, or data files. Stay in communication. The team spread out through the station's corridors. Veltar found himself paired with Captain Jiho and Lieutenant Nari. As they moved deeper into the station, he noticed how differently the humans behaved compared to his regular crew. His Saurian warriors moved with confidence, checking rooms quickly and efficiently. The humans moved more slowly, studying every corner and shadow. Lieutenant Nari kept scanning the walls and ceiling with her equipment, while Captain Jiho seemed to be listening for sounds that Veltar couldn't hear. "Is there a problem?" Veltar asked after watching Jiho examine the same doorway twice. "Maybe," Jiho replied quietly. "The dust patterns don't look right. Someone cleaned this area recently but tried to make it look old." Veltar looked at the floor. It looked normally dusty to him. "You can tell this from dust?" "Humans are good at noticing things that don't belong," Lieutenant Nari said, still scanning the walls. "Commander, these power conduits show signs of recent modification. Someone has been drawing power from the main grid." Before Veltar could respond, his communicator crackled. "Commander, this is Team 2. We found something in the lower cargo bay. You need to see this." They made their way to the cargo bay where Sergeant Kral, one of Veltar's veterans, waited with a grim expression. The large room was mostly empty, but in one corner sat several containers that definitely didn't belong to a mining operation. "Weapon caches," Kral reported. "High-energy plasma rifles, military-grade explosives, and something else." He led them to a larger container. "I think these are egg pods." Veltar felt his blood turn cold as he looked at the organic-looking spheres inside the container. Each one was the size of his head, with a hard shell that pulsed slightly with internal movement. "Void swarm," he whispered. The word sent a chill through every alien on his team. The Void Swarm was a nightmare from the Outer Rim, a species of insectoid creatures that moved from world to world, consuming everything in their path. They had been quiet for decades, but intelligence suggested they were preparing for another expansion. "How many pods?" Captain Jiho asked, seeming remarkably calm for someone who had just encountered one of the galaxy's most dangerous threats. 37 that we can see," Kral replied. "But if these are here..." An inhuman screech echoed through the station's corridors, followed by another, then another. Within seconds, the sound came from everywhere at once. "They're hatching," Veltar said, grabbing his weapon. "All teams return to the docking bay immediately. This is no longer a reconnaissance mission." As they ran through the corridors, Veltar could hear the skittering of clawed feet on metal surfaces. The Void Swarm moved fast when they wanted to, and newborn drones were aggressive and hungry. "Commander!" came a panicked voice over the communicator. "Team 4 is cut off. The creatures are between us and the docking bay." Veltar cursed in his native language. Team 4 included 3 of his best warriors and Private Subin. "All teams converge on Section C. We go together or not at all." When they reached Section C, Veltar saw the problem immediately. At least 50 Void Swarm drones had emerged from hidden nests throughout the station. The creatures were the size of large dogs, with 6 legs, razor-sharp claws, and mandibles that could bite through metal. They moved like a coordinated pack, cutting off escape routes and driving the team deeper into the station. "We're trapped," Sergeant Kral said, stating the obvious. Veltar looked around the room they had taken shelter in. It was a former cafeteria with 2 entrances and no other way out. Through the doorways he could see movement as more drones gathered outside. "How many rounds do we have?" he asked. A quick count revealed they had enough ammunition for maybe 10 minutes of heavy fighting. Against 50 or more drones, that wasn't nearly enough. "Commander," Captain Jiho said quietly, "with your permission, I'd like to try something. What do you have in mind?" Instead of answering directly, Jiho spoke to his team. "Nari, can you overload the power grid in this section?" "Give me 5 minutes," she replied, already working on a wall panel. "Dongwu, I need you to set up covering fire from that position. Maximum noise and flash." "Got it, Captain." "Subin, when the lights go out, you know what to do." Private Subin nodded, and Veltar noticed that she was checking her combat knife rather than her rifle. "Captain," Veltar said, confused by these preparations. "What exactly is your plan?" Jiho looked at him with those calm, dark eyes. "We're going to do what humans do best, Commander. We're going to make them think we're something we're not." Before Veltar could ask what that meant, the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a second later, casting everything in red emergency lighting. But in that moment of darkness, everything changed. Sergeant Dongwu opened fire with his heavy weapon, filling the corridors with blinding flashes and deafening noise. The sound echoed off the metal walls, making it impossible to tell how many weapons were firing or from which direction. At the same time, Captain Jiho began shouting orders, in a voice that carried absolute authority. But the orders didn't make sense. He was calling for air support, artillery strikes, and reinforcement companies that didn't exist. "What are you doing?" Veltar asked. "Making them think we're a much larger force than we actually are," Jiho replied, calmly, never stopping his stream of false commands. Void swarm drones are smart, but they're not strategic thinkers. If they think they're facing a major military operation, they'll pull back and wait for their main force. Lieutenant Nari had somehow tapped into the station's communication system and was broadcasting fake radio chatter, reports of massive fleets approaching, warnings about orbital bombardments, evacuation orders for fictional civilian populations. The effect was immediate. The skittering sounds from the corridors grew more distant as the drones retreated to defensive positions. "Now," Jiho said simply. Private Subin disappeared into the darkness beyond the doorway. Veltar lost sight of her immediately, but he could hear what happened next. Single drones began making different sounds, not the aggressive screeches from before, but confused chittering and alarm calls. "What is she doing out there?" Veltar asked, amazed that anyone would voluntarily go into the dark corridors with those creatures. "Hunting," Sergeant Dongwu replied, not stopping his covering fire. "Subin grew up in the Korean mountains. She knows how to move without being seen." For the next hour, Veltar listened to the sounds of a battle unlike anything he had ever experienced. Not the clash of armies or the thunder of ship-to-ship combat, but something quieter and more terrifying. The systematic elimination of an enemy force by someone they never saw coming. When Private Subin finally returned, her uniform was torn and bloody, but she was smiling. "Corridors clear, Captain. They pulled most of their force back to the main nest, but they left scouts. The scouts won't be reporting back." Veltar stared at this small young human who had just single-handedly eliminated an unknown number of void swarm drones in hand-to-hand combat. "How many?" 11 confirmed, she replied casually, cleaning her knife. "Maybe more, but I lost count after the lights started working again." As they made their way back to the docking bay, Veltar found himself looking at the humans with new eyes. They had taken an impossible situation and turned it into something manageable through deception, misdirection, and individual acts of incredible courage. But what disturbed him most wasn't their effectiveness. It was how calm they had remained throughout the entire ordeal. While his own experienced warriors had shown signs of stress and fear, the humans had simply adapted and moved forward as if fighting for their lives was just another day at work. "Captain," he said as they reached their ships. "How did you know that would work?" Jiho paused at his ship's airlock. "Because, Commander, humans have been the prey species for most of our evolutionary history. We learned a long time ago that when you can't fight fair, you don't fight fair at all." As they departed the station and began their journey back to base, Veltar realized that his initial assessment of humans had been completely wrong. They weren't weak because they were small. The medical bay of the Coalition cruiser Starforge hummed with quiet efficiency as Dr. Minho Han worked over Private Subin's unconscious form. Veltar stood nearby, watching the human medic's hands move with practiced precision over injuries that would have killed most species. 3 parallel gashes ran from Subin's shoulder to her hip, courtesy of a void swarm warrior's claws during their escape from the mining station. Her left arm was broken in 2 places and she had lost enough blood to fill a small bucket. Yet somehow she was still alive. "Will she survive?" Veltar asked. Dr. Han didn't look up from his work. She'll live. Humans are surprisingly hard to kill permanently. He gestured to a display showing Subin's vital signs. See this? Her heart rate dropped to 40 beats per minute during the worst of the bleeding. Most species would have died from shock, but humans can slow down their metabolism when they need to conserve energy. Veltar studied the readouts with fascination. Your species can control their biological functions? To some extent, Han replied, sealing the last of the claw wounds. We evolved as persistence hunters. Sometimes that meant tracking prey for days without food or water. Sometimes it meant surviving injuries that should have been fatal. He finally looked up at Veltar. The same adaptations that made us good at hunting also made us good at surviving combat. Across the medical bay, Lieutenant Nari sat on another bed while a medical robot attached a temporary prosthetic to her left arm. She had lost the limb when a blast door closed on it during their escape. Instead of screaming or going into shock, she had calmly used her remaining hand to apply a tourniquet and continued fighting. Lieutenant, Veltar approached her bed. I must ask, how are you handling the loss of your limb so calmly? Most warriors would be devastated. Nari flexed the mechanical fingers of her new prosthetic, testing its response. Commander, I'm alive. My team is alive, and we completed the mission. Everything else is just details. She looked at him with those steady human eyes. Besides, this arm is probably going to be stronger than my original one. This casual acceptance of permanent injury puzzled Veltar. In Saurian culture, warriors who lost limbs often struggled with shame and depression. Yet Nari seemed almost cheerful about her situation. Captain Jiho entered the medical bay, moving stiffly due to his own injuries. He had taken shrapnel in his back and leg, but had refused treatment until his team was cared for first. How are they? He asked Dr. Han. Subin will be back to full duty in 2 weeks. Nari is already cleared for light duties. Han turned to examine Jiho's wounds. Now sit down and let me fix those holes in your back before you bleed all over my clean medical bay. As Han worked on extracting shrapnel, Veltar noticed something he had missed before. Jiho's hands were shaking slightly, and not from pain or blood loss. The tremor was barely visible, but it was there. Captain, Veltar said carefully. Are you experiencing some form of delayed shock? Jiho was quiet for a moment before answering. No, Commander. I'm angry. Angry? The intelligence report said. We were dealing with pirates. Instead, we walked into a void swarm nest with enough eggs to seed an entire star system. Jiho's voice remained calm, but his hands clenched into fists. Someone knew what was really there, and they sent us anyway. Doctor. Han looked up from his work. Jiho, you need to calm down. Your blood pressure is spiking. I am calm, Jiho replied, which somehow made his anger more disturbing rather than less. Veltar had seen many warriors angry before, but this was different. Saurian rage was hot and explosive, burning bright and fading quickly. Human anger seemed like a cold, controlled thing that could burn for a very long time. Later that day, Veltar received new intelligence reports that confirmed Jiho's suspicions. The Void Swarm was indeed massing for a major offensive, with scout fleets already probing the defenses of several star systems. The mining station had been one of dozens of staging areas, and Coalition intelligence had known about it for weeks. They used us as bait, Veltar realized, reading through the classified files. They wanted to confirm swarm activity without risking a larger force. Jiho, now bandaged and back on duty, stood beside him in the ship's briefing room. The question is, where will they strike first? The answer came 6 hours later in the form of an emergency transmission from the human colony world of New Busan. Void swarm scouts had appeared at the edge of the system, followed by what appeared to be a full invasion fleet. 12 million civilians, Jiho said quietly, reading the population reports. My sister lives there. Her family. Veltar watched the human captain's face carefully. The anger was still there, but now it was joined by something else. Fear. Not for himself, but for people he cared about. The fleet will respond, Veltar assured him. We have 47 ships in this sector. The swarm has over 200, Jiho replied, still studying the tactical displays. Standard doctrine would be to evacuate what civilians we can and fall back to a more defensible position. That seems logical. Jiho looked at him with an expression Veltar couldn't quite read. Commander, there's something you need to understand about humans. We don't abandon our people. Not ever. Over the next several hours, Veltar watched the human response to the crisis unfold. Within minutes of the first distress call, every human ship in the sector began moving toward New Busan. Not just military vessels, but civilian transports, cargo haulers, even private yachts armed with whatever weapons their owners could find. This is madness, Veltar's tactical officer observed. They're outnumbered 5-1. It's not about numbers, Dr. Han said, having joined them on the bridge. It's about who we are. Veltar turned to the human medic. Explain. Han gestured to the tactical display showing dozens of human ships converging on New Busan. Commander, humans spent most of their evolutionary history in small tribal groups. When your tribe was attacked, you didn't calculate odds or consider strategic withdrawal. You fought because letting your people die meant your genetic line ended forever. But surely your modern civilization has moved beyond such primitive instincts. Has it? Han asked. Tell me, Commander, if the Void Swarm attacked your homeworld tomorrow, would you carefully calculate the odds before responding? Or would you gather every ship you could find and go anyway? Veltar considered this. The thought of his homeworld under attack filled him with a burning need to act, regardless of strategic considerations. I would go. Exactly. Some instincts are too deep to evolve away from. Han pointed to another display showing casualty projections. The difference is, humans turned those protective instincts into military doctrine. As their ship joined the growing fleet heading toward New Busan, Veltar received a personal message from Admiral Threx, the Saurian fleet commander. Veltar, I'm ordering your ship to the Kepler Station defense line. This human colony is lost. We need to establish a fallback position before the swarm breaks through. Veltar looked around the bridge at his mixed crew. His Saurian officers waited for his orders, ready to follow doctrine and retreat to safety. The humans continued working at their stations, preparing for a battle they knew they probably couldn't win. Sir, his navigation officer asked. Course, for Kepler Station? Veltar thought about military doctrine, strategic withdrawal, and calculated risks. Then he thought about Private Subin charging a swarm warrior with nothing but a knife to save a teammate. About Lieutenant Nari calmly applying a tourniquet while under fire. About Captain Jiho's controlled anger at being used as bait. Negative, he said finally. Set course for New Busan. Maximum speed. His bridge crew stared at him in shock. Sir, that's a direct violation of Admiral Threx's orders. Yes, it is. Veltar settled back in his command chair. But I'm beginning to think the humans are right about some things. You don't abandon people who can't defend themselves. Captain Jiho looked up from his station with something that might have been gratitude. Thank you, Commander. Don't thank me yet, Veltar replied. We still have to survive what's coming. As they entered hyperspace, Veltar found himself wondering what would happen when they reached New Busan. He had seen humans fight when cornered, but this would be different. This time, they wouldn't be fighting for their own survival. They would be fighting for their families. And somehow, Veltar suspected, that would make them far more dangerous than anything the Void Swarm had encountered before. The skies above New Busan burned with the light of dying ships as Veltar's vessel dropped out of hyperspace. What he saw through the viewport made his scales go cold with dread. The Void Swarm fleet stretched across space like a dark plague. Hundreds of bioships, each one pulsing with organic weapons and carrying thousands of hungry drones. Against them, barely 60 human and allied vessels formed a defensive line that looked pitifully small. Tactical report, Veltar ordered. Swarm, fleet has approximately 200 ships, his sensor officer reported. Coalition forces number 58 vessels. Enemy ground forces are already landing on the southern continent. Captain Jiho studied the displays with grim concentration. How long until they reach the major population centers? At current advance rates, 18 hours to reach New Seoul City, 24 hours to reach the orbital elevators. Veltar watched the tactical situation develop with growing concern. Standard military doctrine was clear. When facing odds of more than 3-1, retreat was the only sensible option. Yet the human ships continued to hold their positions, even as swarm bioships began their attack runs. "Commander," came a transmission from Admiral Threx. "You are ordered to withdraw immediately. The human colony is lost." Before Veltar could respond, another voice cut across the communication channel. "Admiral, this is Colonel Hyun-Woo Nam, New Busan Defense Command. We are implementing Protocol Alamo. All civilian evacuation efforts are suspended. We're going to make our stand here." "Colonel," Admiral Threx's voice carried disbelief. "You cannot possibly hold against those numbers. Protocol Alamo is suicide." "Maybe," Colonel Nam replied calmly. "But it's our choice to make." Veltar had never heard of Protocol Alamo, but Captain Jiho's expression told him everything he needed to know. "Captain, what exactly is Protocol Alamo?" Jiho was quiet for a moment before answering. "It means no retreat, no surrender, no matter what the cost. We fight until we win or until there's nothing left to fight with." "That's insane." "Yes," Jiho agreed. "It is." On the planet's surface, massive explosions began lighting up the night side as swarm drop pods landed among the cities. But instead of panic and chaos, Veltar witnessed something he had never seen before in his 40 years of military service. The entire human civilian population was transforming into a military force. Teachers barricaded schools and turned classrooms into defensive positions. Factory workers converted their industrial equipment into weapons manufacturing centers. Even children too young to fight were organized into supply and communication networks. "How is this possible?" Veltar asked, watching citywide defensive preparations unfold on his tactical displays. Dr. Han, who had remained on the bridge to monitor casualty reports, looked up from his station. "Commander, human civilization exists because our ancestors were willing to fight impossible odds to protect their communities. Every human child learns the stories of Thermopylae, the Alamo, Stalingrad, places where people chose to die, fighting, rather than live under conquest. But these are civilians, they have no military training." "Every human has military training," Captain Jiho said quietly. "We just don't all use it at the same time." As if to prove his point, Veltar watched a middle-aged woman named Yoonji-song coordinate the defense of a school filled with evacuated children. She moved with the precision of a trained soldier, setting up crossfire positions and organizing ammunition supplies. When Veltar accessed her civilian records, he discovered she was a mathematics teacher with no official military background. "How does a teacher know advanced battlefield tactics?" he asked. "Because she's human," Lieutenant Nari replied from her station. "We all learn this stuff as kids. History lessons, strategy games, survival training disguised as camping trips. By the time we're adults, every human knows how to fight a war, even if they've never been in one." The first swarm assault wave hit the orbital defenses like a living tsunami. Bioships with acid weapons dissolved through shield generators while swarms of fighter drones overwhelmed point defense systems. Within 30 minutes, the outer defensive ring was broken, but instead of breaking through to the planet's surface as expected, the swarm found themselves caught in a trap. As their ships pushed deeper into the orbital zone, concealed defense platforms came online throughout the system. Not military installations, but converted mining stations, cargo depots, and even pleasure craft that had been secretly armed over the past few hours. They turned the entire star system into a fortress, Veltar realized, watching swarm ships take fire from directions they hadn't expected. "Standard human doctrine," Jiho explained. "If you can't match your enemy's strength, you change the battlefield to favor your weaknesses." The space battle raged for 6 hours, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. But on the planet's surface, something remarkable was happening. The swarm ground forces, which should have easily overwhelmed human resistance, found themselves being systematically destroyed by an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Veltar watched in fascination as small teams of human fighters used guerrilla tactics that would have impressed the galaxy's finest special forces. They struck swarm landing zones with improvised explosives, then vanished into urban areas where every building became a potential ambush site. But what truly amazed him was how ordinary civilians integrated themselves into the defense effort. A bakery owner named Keong coordinated supply runs to frontline fighters, using delivery trucks that had been armored with kitchen equipment. A group of teenagers led by 16-year-old Yuna turned their school's chemistry lab into a bomb factory, producing explosives that could destroy swarm warrior forms. "Commander," Sergeant Dongwu reported from the planet's surface where he was coordinating with local defense forces. "The swarm is pulling back from the eastern districts. They can't maintain their advance with these casualty rates." "What casualty rates?" Veltar asked. "They're losing approximately 40% of each assault wave to civilian resistance. The drones can handle military opposition, but they weren't designed to fight an entire population." Veltar studied the battle reports in amazement. The Void Swarm had conquered dozens of worlds, but they had always faced conventional military forces. They had never encountered a species where every individual was a potential combatant. As the battle entered its 12th hour, something unexpected happened. The swarm fleet began to show signs of hesitation. Their attack patterns became more cautious, their advance slower and more methodical. "They're afraid," Captain Jiho observed, studying the enemy formations. "Afraid? The Void Swarm doesn't experience fear? No, but they understand cost-benefit analysis. They came here expecting to harvest a helpless population. Instead, they're facing extinction-level resistance from every human on the planet." Lieutenant Nari looked up from her tactical display. "Sir, I'm reading massive energy signatures from the Swarm command ship. They're preparing something big." Veltar enhanced the sensor readings and felt his blood freeze. "Planetary bombardment array. They're going to sterilize the entire surface." The Swarm had decided that if they couldn't conquer New Busan, they would destroy it completely rather than accept the level of casualties required for victory. "All human ships," came Colonel Nam's voice over the communication system. "The swarm is preparing orbital bombardment. Begin final attack pattern." "Final attack pattern?" Veltar asked. Captain Jiho's expression had gone completely calm, which Veltar had learned was a very dangerous sign in humans. "It means we're going to ram them." "That's suicide." "Yes, it is." Jiho turned to his crew. "All hands prepare for impact trajectory. We're going to take out their command ship." Veltar watched in horror and amazement as every human vessel in the system turned toward the swarm fleet and began accelerating at maximum speed. They weren't retreating or maneuvering for tactical advantage. They were charging directly into the heart of the enemy formation, ready to sacrifice themselves to protect the people on the planet below. "Captain," Veltar said quietly, "this is madness." Jiho looked at him with those calm, determined eyes that Veltar was beginning to understand represented something far more dangerous than any weapon. "No, Commander. This is what humans do when everything they care about is threatened. We become something that the universe has never seen before." As their ship accelerated toward certain death, Veltar realized he was about to witness either the most beautiful or the most terrifying thing in the galaxy, possibly both. 6 months after the Battle of New Busan, Veltar stood in the memorial garden overlooking New Seoul City. The rebuilt skyline stretched toward a sky that no longer burned with the light of dying ships. Around him, thousands of beings from dozens of species had gathered to honor the dead and celebrate the living. The numbers still seemed impossible to believe. The Void Swarm had arrived with over 200 ships and nearly 1 million ground troops. When the battle ended, 18 hours later, their entire invasion force had been destroyed or driven off. The cost to defend New Busan had been terrible. Over 40,000 human casualties and the complete destruction of most orbital infrastructure, but they had won. "Commander Veltar," a familiar voice called from behind him. He turned to see Private Subin approaching, walking with only a slight limp from her injuries at the mining station. Her dress uniform bore new decorations, including the Galactic Cross for Valor that she had earned during the final hours of the battle. "Private Subin," he replied, offering the human-style handshake he had learned to appreciate. How are you recovering? Better every day, she said with that bright smile that seemed permanently fixed on her face. Dr. Han says I'll be back to full combat status next month. And then? Then I get assigned to the new Human Shock Division. Apparently, other species have started requesting human troops for their most difficult missions. This didn't surprise Veltar. Word of what had happened at New Busan had spread throughout the galactic community, faster than hyperspace communications could carry it. The idea that an entire population could transform into an effective military force had shocked governments and military planners across known space. Captain Jiho approached them, now wearing the insignia of a major. His promotion had come with assignment to the Galactic Defense Command, where human tactical doctrine was being studied and integrated into coalition military strategy. Commander, Jiho said, I wanted to thank you again for staying with us during the battle. I made the only choice that seemed honorable, Veltar replied, though I admit I thought we were all going to die. So did we, Jiho said simply. That's what made it work. Veltar still didn't fully understand that logic, but he had learned not to question it. Human psychology remained a mystery to him, but the results spoke for themselves. During the final assault on the swarm command ship, when every human vessel had begun their kamikaze runs, something unexpected had happened. The combined mass of 60 ships striking simultaneously had overwhelmed the bioship's organic defenses, but instead of destroying themselves in the impact, many of the human crews had survived to board the enemy vessel. What followed had been 18 minutes of close-quarters combat that military historians were already calling the most savage boarding action in recorded history. By the time it was over, the swarm command ship was under human control, and the rest of their fleet was retreating in complete disarray. Major, Veltar said, using Jiho's new rank. I have been wondering about something since the battle. When your people began their final attack run, you all seemed to accept death as inevitable, yet many of you survived? Was this part of your planning? Jiho considered the question carefully. No, Commander. We really were prepared to die. But humans have a saying, fortune favors the bold. Sometimes the craziest plan works precisely because it's so crazy that nobody expects it. Lieutenant Nari joined their group, her new prosthetic arm working perfectly as she carried drinks for everyone. Her promotion to captain had come with assignment to the Technological Integration Division, where human engineering methods were being applied to improve galactic military equipment. The real secret, she said, continuing the conversation, is that humans don't fight to survive. We fight to win. There's a difference. Explain, Veltar requested. Most species fight until they calculate that continued fighting will result in their destruction. Then they retreat or surrender. Humans fight until the enemy is destroyed or we are. We don't have a middle setting. Dr. Han approached their group, now wearing the uniform of a lieutenant colonel in the medical corps. His research into human physiology and psychology had become required reading at military academies throughout the galaxy. Commander Veltar, he said, I understand you're writing the official report on human military effectiveness for the Defense Council. I am, Veltar confirmed, though I'm struggling with how to explain some of what I observed. Such as? How do I explain to other species that humans become more dangerous when they're afraid, not less? How do I describe a civilization that teaches its children to fight impossible odds as a matter of cultural identity? Dr. Han smiled. Tell them the truth, that humans are the result of 4 billion years of evolution on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We survived by becoming something that refuses to give up, no matter what the odds. But surely that's an exaggeration. Is it? Sergeant Dongwu had joined their group, now wearing the insignia of a lieutenant in the newly formed Human Heavy Assault Division. Commander, on Earth we have storms that can level cities, earthquakes that split continents, diseases that kill millions, and predators that hunt in packs. We survived all of that before we ever left our planet. And now, Captain Nari added, We've learned that the same skills that helped us survive on Earth work pretty well against hostile alien species too. As the memorial ceremony began, Veltar listened to the speeches from various coalition leaders. They spoke of sacrifice, courage, and the importance of defending innocent lives. But he noticed that when the human speakers took the podium, they said something different. Colonel Nam, who had coordinated the planetary defense, spoke last. "We didn't fight the Void Swarm because we were brave," he said to the assembled crowd. "We fought because we were terrified. Terrified of losing our families, our homes, our future. But humans learned long ago that being afraid doesn't mean being helpless. Fear keeps us sharp. Fear keeps us focused. Fear reminds us what we're fighting for. The Void Swarm came here expecting to face a military force. Instead, they found 12 million humans who were fighting for everything they had ever loved." He paused, looking out over the crowd. "That's why they lost. Not because we were stronger or smarter or better equipped. They lost because they underestimated what humans become when everything we care about is threatened." After the ceremony, Veltar walked through the rebuilt sections of New Soul City. Everywhere he looked, he saw signs of the battle and the recovery. Buildings showed scars from swarm weapons. Memorial plaques marked places where civilians had died defending their neighborhoods. But there was also new construction, new businesses, new families moving into the restored areas. "Commander," a young voice called out. He turned to see Yuna, the teenager who had turned her school's chemistry lab into an explosives factory during the battle. She was now studying military engineering at the New Busan Defense Academy. "Yuna," he said, "how are your studies progressing?" "Very well," she replied. "I'm working on new defensive systems based on what we learned during the invasion. My professor says that human engineering tends to focus on making things work under impossible conditions." "And is that accurate?" She grinned. "Absolutely. We're really good at making things work when they shouldn't." That evening, Veltar sat in his quarters aboard the Coalition Command ship, working on his report to the Defense Council. After 6 months of observation and analysis, he finally understood what made humans so effective in combat. He began typing. "The human species represents a unique development in galactic military capabilities. Unlike other coalition members, humans do not fight to avoid defeat. They fight to achieve victory, regardless of personal cost. This fundamental difference in mindset produces several tactical advantages. First, human forces maintain combat effectiveness even when facing overwhelming odds. Where other species might retreat or surrender when defeat becomes probable, humans tend to increase their aggression and tactical creativity. Second, human civilian populations can rapidly transition to military resistance with minimal preparation. Their cultural emphasis on individual responsibility and historical knowledge of warfare means that every human settlement is potentially a military fortress. Third, humans demonstrate an unusual ability to function effectively while experiencing high levels of fear and stress. Rather than impairing their performance, these emotional states appear to enhance their focus and determination. However, the most significant factor in human military effectiveness is their willingness to accept casualties that other species would consider unacceptable. This is not due to a lack of regard for life, but rather because humans value certain ideals more than individual survival. Recommendation: human forces should be integrated into coalition military doctrine as specialized shock troops for situations requiring unconventional tactics or extreme determination. However, command staff should be prepared for human units to take actions that appear suicidal, but may prove tactically sound. Additional note: any hostile force considering military action against human populations should be advised that they are not facing a conventional military opponent. They are facing a species that has survived as apex predators on one of the galaxy's most dangerous worlds.